keep them on next time.
I was going to sign first, but talk first. Okay, the next order of business is the regular business of the board, the retirement board appointment. Board to deliberate on candidates and consider voting to appoint the fifth member of the retirement board. As we all know, we've been three iterations or so on this, so.
Do we, I know that the desire is to allow public input. Would we like public input before the board deliberates, during the board's deliberation, or after the board's deliberation?
Actually, I was...
Because I'd like to nail it down to one of those three options.
I'm not sure we should have public input because...
Well, I mean, I think you said during citizens petitions that, you know, I think you're encouraging Mr. Pokers to wait to provide his input. So to me, that inferred that we'd be allowing public input. So...
Best off doing it before then.
What's that?
I think best off doing it before.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
Once we close it down, I think it's the board vote.
That's
and
what I was thinking.
We just, Mr. Chair, I would just urge that, given the hour, that we kind
I
of
agree.
limit the time.
Okay, if there's any input on this, please be brief
In
and
10 minutes.
seeing none.
He's asking if you want to talk. If I could just finish the thought I started before. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bob Pokers, Cherrywood Circle. As I observed myself last week at the Selectmen's meeting, you have one very strong, highly qualified candidate, genuinely independent, with directly relevant public office experience, and then the other candidate, someone who has admitted he has no relevant experience or expertise in these matters, and is a textbook example and definition of conflict of interest by his own admittance at the meeting last week, who, when questioned at the meeting last week, admitted in somewhat of a confrontational tone to a question regarding his conflict of interest that, if appointed, he would not recuse himself on either votes that affect the financial interests of his spouse, who's collecting town benefits as a retiree, or which would benefit him because he also collects post-retirement benefits that he gets through his spouse. So, in my opinion, and I think that's probably reflected by a lot of other people in town who had an opportunity to either watch directly or through town video the interviews of the candidates, that you really only have one candidate who represents the interests of all residents and not the narrow interests of a special interest group. To us, the choice could not be clearer, and we hope you will recognize the big distinction between one candidate who is very well qualified and can provide the independence that we as residents are looking for in this particular appointment to the retirement board, and someone else who may be academically very qualified but has very significant conflicts of interest that affect how he would vote on matters coming before the retirement board. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Yes. Thank you for your brevity, Bob.
I wasn't planning on speaking, but I feel that I
And
need
yet
to...
you're here.
And yet I'm here. Barbara Morash, retiree.
Welcome, Barbara.
I feel like I have to respond to Mr. Pokers' statements. And before I do that, I have to say that I certainly am, in general, for any elderly mitigation that the town can do. So I've been sitting here listening to the tax rate, and, you know, I certainly agree that the taxes are out of control, and I even agree with Mr. Landry that it comes down to spending. And then, of course, I cringe when I hear that, you know, oh, a big part of that is because of us retirees and our health insurance. But in response to Mr. Pokers, and anybody else that cares, I'm a little concerned that the emphasis is on what are we going to do for the fixed income people in Andover, and yet those same people are the ones that are so against the retirees who are also fixed income people.
If you could stay to the appointment of the
Okay.
retirement board.
Sorry.
Okay?
In direct response to Mr. Pokers' comments on the candidates, yes, we all recognize that Mr. Kramer having a spouse who collects a pension could sway your vote. After listening to Mr. Kramer's interview and observing his personality and demeanor, I believe that he was taking his responsibility as a retirement board member very seriously, despite this perceived conflict. And I don't think a man like Mr. Kramer would automatically vote in a COLA for all the retirees just to put $360 a year in his pocket. I think because of his analytical nature, that he's going to analyze the consequences of the whole picture, not just what's going to be in his pocket. And even though he does receive OPEB benefits, I don't think there's anything the retirement board can do for past recipients to affect that. So I really don't think that if Mr. Kramer receives OPEB benefits, that the retirement board can or would take a vote that all of a sudden eliminated those benefits for prior recipients. I could be naive about this, but that's my opinion. As for relevant experience, I was impressed by Mr. Kramer and how much experience he's had coordinating teams, and I think that's what we're looking for on the retirement board. Someone who can improve the dynamics of the retirement board. He mentioned several times that he wants to do an analysis of the true impact of things. I think that's something we need. We've had both dramatic sides of, what the true OPEB costs are and the pension liability. But, I'd like to see some independent analysis of those things. And I think he has the intelligence and skills to do that. Needless to say, I would endorse Mr. Kramer, but not because of the obvious bias toward retirees that is perceived. I would endorse him because I think he could do a good job wading through all the hype and coming up with true figures and impacts. Also, he mentioned that he could potentially come up with compromises and creative ideas. We need a person like that, not just one that will follow the party line and either be, pro or anti-retirees. So I hope that you will take those things into consideration.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thanks, Bob.
Mr. Rowley?
It's funny, the speech that she just made reminds me of the speech that I heard when we had Mr. Stump and Mr. Workman, that there was some perceived alignment between one of the selectmen and that person. There is a perceived possibility that Mr. Kramer may have a bias. I personally have nothing against him. However, I would prefer a person who has no perceived bias to be selected by this group, feeling that that person would be have the least reason to vote in a certain way. So I hope I made my point. I don't know.
Thank you. I see no other, the board?
Just to close this topic, Laura, there are a couple pages that you missed signing.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, anything further from the board? Like to speak on the,
I think both candidates came with a seriousness. I think both candidates should be commended on the way they approached the interview process, and appreciate both candidates for the time they put into the process, and clearly both took the time to understand the role. So I think they should both be commended on that, just the way the prior three did. We have two in front of us. I would like to make a motion to appoint Gary Coon as the fifth member and put that for consideration of the board. So I'd like to make a motion to nominate Mr. Coon.
okay, there's been a motion. Second. And a second. Further discussion?
Yes, please. I'd just like to talk a little bit about the process. I think that although all people may not agree, the process is process. It's a majority of the Board of Selectmen is the decision that gets made. I want to really take this opportunity, actually, to thank the people that have provided constructive feedback. I'll say notably Mr. Hartwell provided a very nice email today providing some positive, constructive feedback. Another individual, Crystal Solomon, provided really a nice email, well thought out email. But when you have people that provide constructive feedback, you also have people that provide negative feedback. I'd like to make some comments on a couple of the pieces of feedback that we, the elected members, Board of Selectmen, have received. First one was from a resident, and I'm just not going to share the resident's name, but it says, if you're a retired Andover resident, it's time to move out. This town has gone to hell with you people and can only get worse. So that's the feedback that I, as an elected official, received.
Unsigned. We all did.
Unsigned.
You know, and you know, I also want to highlight the fact that as well, somebody just texted me, and people are on social media right now stating that open meeting law violations have occurred already due to Mr. Lepoli's participation, or due to the Lepoli project being on citizens petitions. I want to share one more piece of information, which this does have to do with this, because it has to do with the process. One more piece of information that really disappoints me. And please give me a little leeway here, Mr. Chair. This was an email that was forwarded to me by a town employee. And give me a second. One sec, if you don't mind. Yeah, maybe I can come up on my phone. But this is the nature of politics in the town of Andover, and it disgusts me. So give me a second, please.
Sure. I'll let you finish that sentence.
Okay, here it is. Reception's better here. So this is an email that was sent by Selectman Landry. And in this email, Selectman Landry says, Selectman Paul Salafia, Dan Kowalski, and Laura Gregory have a choice tomorrow night when the board finally votes to appoint the 5th member of the retirement board. They can continue to bow to the demands of the unions and the municipal employees and vote for, and it continues. Obviously, Selectman Landry doesn't know me, because I don't bow to the demands of anybody. So you don't know me at all. And that is the type of thing that's wrong with politics in this town.
It's called free speech, Dan.
Yeah, it's called free speech, and it's called respect.
It's called free speech. You're free to
It's
express your views here. I'm free to express
respect.
mine.
You know what? You're very intelligent, Bob. You bring a lot to the table. But when you act like a donkey, it reflects upon you.
Oh, I'm
It
sorry.
minimizes
I'm
what
sorry.
you do.
What are our policies about admonishing?
Well, you do
Okay.
a
So-
pretty good amount
Yeah,
of
fair enough. Fair enough.
When you give,
Oh, good. Yes, speak.
Can I,
when you give out a truckload of
Yeah, you can
negativity,
dish it out, but
occasionally
you
you get a
can't
teaspoon.
take
Oh,
it.
no, I can take
All right.
it.
Only
It's
you
your
can't.
free speech
All right.
rights.
We are done.
You're complaining about
We're done.
mine.
We're talking about the retirement board trustee, 5th member. We have a motion on the floor. It has been seconded, and I'm seeing some pictures.
We said we're not going back to the board.
Sorry, we're not going back. Is it for this?
yes.
No, you said no more. It's
I'm
a
not
board,
done.
it's a
We're done.
board.
Laura, do you have anything to say?
I had some concerns that I didn't feel like Mr. Coon was very well prepared at the interview. He had had weeks to be here, and he couldn't answer some questions about the retirement board and how things work, and that made me concerned about his commitment to the job, should he get it.
And can I just clarify, Selectwoman Gregory, you're choosing not to recuse yourself from this vote, I gather?
Why does she need to recuse?
Well, because of this is a continuation of a process that started when Selectwoman Gregory acknowledged an ethics mistake by not disclosing a campaign contribution
Now
to
that
a
it's
prior
disclosed.
candidate.
Well, I had disclosed it
It's your choice whether to do it,
appropriately.
but I gather you're going to not recuse yourself, correct?
I'm not going to recuse myself from
Okay.
this vote, that's correct. I stated in my disclosure that I would not vote with regard to Mr. Turco.
Okay.
I had actually disclosed correctly the donation through my campaign finance documents, which had been filed months before. There was no violation. The disclosure was in a abundance of caution to make it clear, and I did state in that I would not vote if Mr. Turco was up for the, there was a motion on him for the position, which there has never been.
Okay, so it's your choice. I will say for the record, I think you should recuse yourself for the reasons that have been stated, so.
Okay. You got anything further?
No, I'm just writing the motion.
Dan, you have anything further? Okay, I'm just going to say that I was probably one of the people who prolonged this process longer than it should have been, but I was very staunch in my insistence that this be an unbiased, an independent and objective candidate. And I think I stood by those principles throughout the process. Unfortunately, we went through the first 3 candidates and had to restart. We have another 2 candidates. I thought that Mr. Kramer was absolutely impressive. I thought his life experience, his ability to answer the questions was actually very good. The problem is I can't get beyond his perceived or actual conflict of interest. So unfortunately, although I thought he was a terrific candidate, I'm unable to vote for him. So
let's take a vote.
So, all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Motion carries 4-1. Mr. Coon is the
5th member.
5th member of the retirement board. And I too want to reiterate what Alex said. I think Alex was absolutely right when he said that these people came before us and bared themselves and did a terrific job volunteering or proposing that they volunteer for the town, and for that we'll be forever grateful. I'll give you 1 second to, I'd like to move on.
Yeah,
but-
so I'm fine with losing the vote. That's up to you, your prerogative. I'm sick and tired of this conflict of interest nonsense. So my wife is retired. I called the State Ethics Commission. They said it was a non-issue. And unless Mr. Landry is running on a platform of cutting existing retirees' benefits, in which case he should go out there and try to get elected. That is a total non-issue.
All right, this is.
I want to say one more thing.
All right.
If you think I want to serve on the retirement board for $360 a year, there are a lot easier ways to get that.
Absolutely.
So it's absolute nonsense. I'd use stronger language, but I won't. So
Thank
this
you.
whole, it was just a smear campaign. And I didn't get up and say anything because I thought, I'll let this play out. And I did. Go ahead, keep smiling, Mr. Landry. It's fine by me, your smear campaign worked.
Let's try to be as civil as we possibly can.
I am. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's hard.
It is very hard to be civil at times. It certainly is. Okay, that's behind us, I think. That's cool.